After a stellar performance review, I, Tom Jones, was offered a promotion that could change the trajectory of my career. My boss called me into his office, a smile playing on his lips as he congratulated me on my hard work and dedication. He presented me with two options. The first was a managerial position in the same department, allowing me to oversee a team and drive strategic initiatives. The second was a more ambitious role, involving relocation to the company's new branch overseas, where I would lead an entire division. Both options promised significant career advancement, higher pay, and greater responsibilities. As I listened to him outline the opportunities, I felt a mix of pride and excitement, knowing that my efforts were being recognized and rewarded. This promotion was not just a professional milestone, but a testament to the countless hours I'd invested in my job. It was a moment of triumph, a validation of my commitment, and a glimpse into a promising future. Little did I know that this professional high would soon be overshadowed by personal turmoil, as I would soon uncover a revelation that would shake the very foundation of my life. Amid the euphoria of my recent promotion, I stumbled upon a credit card statement that would irrevocably alter the course of my life. The statement, innocuous at first glance, contained charges I couldn't recall making. Extravagant dinners at restaurants I had never visited. Hotel bookings in the city despite neither of us traveling for work. And lavish purchases that didn't fit our usual spending habits. As I scrutinized each line item, a sickening realization began to dawn on me. These were not just innocent errors or misunderstandings. The mounting evidence pointed to something far more sinister: my wife's potential infidelity. My mind raced as I pieced together the clues, the late-night meetings, the unexplained absences, the sudden need for privacy. Each charge on that statement felt like a dagger, piercing through the facade of our seemingly perfect marriage. This unexpected discovery led to a cascade of revelations, forcing me to confront the cracks in our relationship that I had been too blind, or too trusting, to see. The betrayal was not just in the acts themselves, but in the deception that accompanied them, making me question the very foundation of our union. As the reality of the situation settled in, I knew that our marriage would never be the same again. As the weight of my recent discovery bore down on me, memories of my past began to flood my mind, bringing into sharp focus the journey that had led me to this moment. I grew up in a small town, where hard work and determination were values instilled in me from a young age. My parents, both blue-collar workers, sacrificed a great deal to ensure I received a good education. Their unwavering support and belief in my potential drove me to excel academically. I graduated at the top of my class in high school and earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, where I majored in business administration. During my sophomore year, I met Linda. She was captivating, with an infectious laugh and a kind heart. We bonded over our shared interests and ambitions, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Linda was pursuing a degree in psychology, and her passion for understanding people and their motivations complemented my analytical nature. We were a perfect match, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. After graduation, I landed a job at a reputable firm, where I climbed the ranks through sheer grit and dedication. Linda and I married a year later, in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Our early years together were filled with joy and promise. We bought a cozy house, traveled to exotic destinations, and planned our future with hopeful hearts. However, as the years went by, we faced challenges that tested our relationship. We struggled with starting a family, facing infertility issues that added strain to our once happy marriage. The pressures of work and the disappointment of failed attempts to conceive began to take a toll on us. Despite these hardships, I remained committed to our marriage, believing that our love could weather any storm. Linda and I had our share of disagreements, but I always thought we were fundamentally strong, united by the vows we had taken and the dreams we shared. Little did I know that beneath the surface, there were cracks forming, cracks that would eventually widen into a chasm too vast to bridge. As I stood there, holding the damning credit card statement, the memories of our journey together felt like a cruel reminder of what we once had and what we were on the brink of losing. As the years progressed, Linda and I encountered challenges that gradually strained our once strong bond. The most significant and heart-wrenching challenge was our struggle to start a family. We had always dreamed of having children, imagining a home filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. However, as months turned into years without any success, our hopes began to wane. We sought medical advice and underwent various treatments, but each negative test result felt like a blow to our dreams and our relationship. The infertility issues became a source of constant tension between us. Linda, who had always been the optimistic one, began to withdraw into herself, consumed by feelings of inadequacy and sadness. I tried to be supportive, but there were times when my own frustration and disappointment surfaced, leading to heated arguments and hurtful words. Our once spontaneous and joyful intimacy turned into a calculated and stressful task, driven by ovulation schedules and fertility treatments. In addition to our struggles with starting a family, other changes in our relationship dynamics began to emerge. My career advancement brought with it increased responsibilities and longer hours at the office. While I was proud of my professional achievements, I often felt guilty for the time it took away from Linda and our marriage. She, on the other hand, felt increasingly neglected and isolated, her own career in psychology taking a back seat to our relentless pursuit of parenthood. The emotional and physical toll of our infertility journey, coupled with my demanding job, created a distance between us that neither of us could bridge. We stopped communicating as openly as we once did, each of us retreating into our own worlds of pain and frustration. Linda's once bright and infectious laughter became a rare sound in our home, replaced by tense silences and unspoken resentments. Our social life also suffered as a result of our challenges. Friends who had started families of their own became painful reminders of what we lacked, and we found ourselves declining invitations to baby showers and family gatherings. The isolation further deepened the chasm between us, making it harder to find common ground. Through all of this, I held on to the belief that we could overcome these challenges together. I believed that our love and commitment would see us through the darkest times. But as the months turned into years, and the pressures mounted, I began to see the cracks in our marriage more clearly. The credit card statement revealing Linda's potential infidelity was not just a symptom of our problems, but a glaring indicator that our relationship had reached a breaking point. The challenges we faced had not only changed our relationship dynamics, but it also brought us to the brink of a painful and irrevocable decision. The discovery of the suspicious credit card statement gnawed at me, leaving me unable to shake the feeling that Linda had betrayed our marriage. The trust we had built over the years seemed to be crumbling before my eyes, and I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. After days of agonizing over the possibility, I decided to hire a private investigator to confirm my suspicions of infidelity. It was a difficult decision, but the uncertainty was unbearable, and I needed concrete evidence to confront Linda. The investigator, a seasoned professional, assured me that he would discreetly gather the information I needed. The waiting period felt like an eternity. Each day was filled with a mix of dread and anticipation, as I tried to carry on with my daily routine while bracing myself for what the investigation might uncover. My performance at work began to suffer, as my mind was constantly preoccupied with thoughts of Linda's potential betrayal. When the investigator finally provided his report, my worst fears were confirmed. The evidence was irrefutable. Photographs of Linda with another man, intimate encounters, and detailed logs of their meetings. The man was someone I had never met, a stranger who had somehow become entangled in my life. The shock and devastation of seeing the proof of Linda's infidelity was overwhelming. It felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath me, leaving me adrift in a sea of hurt and betrayal. Armed with this evidence, I knew that I could no longer stay in the marriage. The love and trust that had once defined our relationship had been shattered beyond repair. As much as it pained me, I realized that divorce was the only option. It was a decision that marked a significant turning point in my life, one that would forever alter the course of my future. In addition to deciding on a divorce, I made the difficult choice to relocate for work. The overseas position that had been offered to me during my promotion now seemed like a lifeline, a chance to start anew and distance myself from the painful memories of my marriage. It was an opportunity to focus on my career and rebuild my life on my own terms. I began the process of initiating the divorce, consulting with a lawyer to understand my rights and the steps involved. The legal proceedings were daunting, but I was resolute in my decision. I gathered the necessary documents, including the evidence of Linda's infidelity, and prepared myself for the confrontation that would inevitably follow. As I packed my belongings and made arrangements for my relocation, I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the end of a relationship that had once been filled with love and hope, and relief at the prospect of a fresh start. The decision to divorce and relocate marked the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of another, filled with uncertainty, but also with the possibility of healing and growth. This turning point was not just about leaving behind a broken marriage, but about reclaiming my life and my sense of self. It was a step towards a future where I could rebuild, free from the shadows of betrayal and pain. I followed Linda into the living room, my heart heavy with the weight of the impending confrontation. The room felt different, colder somehow, as if it could sense the tension between us. I closed the door behind me, the soft click of the latch echoing louder than usual in the strained silence. My eyes quickly landed on the stack of divorce papers still on the chair, a stark reminder of the irrevocable step I was about to take. Linda stood by the window, her back to me, her posture rigid and defensive. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the distance that had grown between us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. The air felt thick with unspoken words and lingering doubts, and I knew there was no turning back now. "Linda," I began, my voice breaking the silence. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of anger, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite identify. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked to the divorce papers, then back to me. "I suppose we do," she replied, her tone clipped and resigned. The defensive edge in her voice only fueled my resolve. I walked over to the chair, picking up the papers and holding them between us. "These are the result of your choices," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Your actions have consequences, and this is one of them." Linda's face hardened, her eyes narrowing. "You don't understand, Tom. You never tried to understand." "Understand what, Linda?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "That you broke our vows? That you betrayed me? How can I understand something so selfish and destructive?" She flinched at my words, but the defiance in her eyes remained. "You were always working, always too busy to notice how lonely I was. I needed someone, and you weren't there." Her justification only deepened my resolve. "That's no excuse for what you did," I said firmly. "We could have talked, sought help, anything but this. Infidelity isn't a solution. It's a betrayal." The tension in the room was palpable, the air charged with our conflicting emotions. As I stood there, holding the divorce papers that symbolized the end of our marriage, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. This confrontation was just the beginning of a painful but necessary journey towards closure. "Linda, this isn't just about the affair," I continued, my voice softer but no less determined. "It's about the trust and respect that are essential in a marriage. You shattered those, and now we have to face the consequences." She looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "So, this is really it then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I replied, my own voice heavy with sadness. "This is it. We have to move on, for both our sakes." As the reality of our situation settled in, I placed the divorce papers back on the chair, a tangible symbol of the end of our life together. The living room, once a space filled with shared memories and dreams, now felt like a battleground of broken promises and painful truths. This was the end of our journey as a couple, and the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter in both our lives. Linda, still standing by the window, took a deep breath and turned to face me fully. Her eyes, now clouded with a mixture of regret and frustration, locked onto mine. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, her lips pressed into a thin line, before she finally spoke. "Tom," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "I can't believe it's come to this. I never thought we'd be standing here, on the brink of ending everything we've built together." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know I've made mistakes, but you have to understand how I felt, how lonely and abandoned I've been." I crossed my arms, my posture defensive, but my ears open. I had to hear her out, even if every word felt like a twist of the knife. "Linda, I get that you were lonely," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "But why didn't you talk to me? Why did you go behind my back instead of facing the problems head-on with me?" She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Talk to you? When? Between your late-night meetings and endless business trips? It felt like you were married to your job more than to me. Every time I tried to bring it up, you brushed me off, saying we'd talk later. Later never came, Tom." Her words stung because there was a kernel of truth in them. I had been engrossed in my career, especially after the promotion, but that didn't justify her actions. "I know I wasn't always there," I admitted, "but that doesn't excuse what you did. We could have gone to counseling, taken a break, anything but this betrayal." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I regret it every single day, but can't we at least try to fix this? Throwing everything away without even trying feels wrong. We owe it to ourselves to at least make an effort." My heart ached at her words, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Linda, trust is the foundation of any relationship. You broke that trust in the worst possible way. How can we rebuild from here when the very core of our marriage has been shattered?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out, grabbing my hands. "Please, Tom, let's not end it like this. I know we can find a way through this if we just try." I pulled my hands away gently, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on me. "Linda, it's not just about trying. It's about acknowledging the depth of the hurt and the fact that some things can't be undone. I need to move forward, and I think you do too. Separately." Her shoulders slumped, and she took a step back, wiping away a tear. "So, that's it then? You won't even consider trying?" I shook my head, feeling a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "I can't, Linda. Not after everything. We both need to heal, and I don't think that can happen if we stay together. I'm sorry." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions and the finality of our situation. As Linda stood there, the fight seemed to drain out of her, replaced by a resigned sadness. This was the end of our conversation, and the beginning of a new, separate chapter in our lives. Linda, taken aback by my unwavering stance, looked at me with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Her eyes searched mine, hoping to find some hint of hesitation or doubt. But there was none. I had made up my mind, and nothing she could say would change that. "I thought you would fight for us, Tom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you'd be angry, yes, but that you would still want to try and make things work. I never imagined you'd just give up on us so easily." Her words cut deep, but I couldn't let them sway me. "Linda, this isn't about giving up," I replied, my tone firm yet gentle. "This is about facing reality. Our relationship was already on shaky ground, and your actions were the final blow. We can't rebuild something that has been so fundamentally broken." She shook her head, as if trying to dispel a fog of confusion. "I thought you didn't care enough to notice," she said, her voice tinged with regret. "You were always so focused on work, so distant. I convinced myself that you didn't love me anymore, that you wouldn't even care if I strayed." I sighed, the weight of her misconceptions adding to the heavy burden I already carried. "Linda, I did notice," I said, my voice softer now. "But I thought I was doing the right thing by focusing on my career, by providing for us. I thought we were in this together, supporting each other through the tough times. I never imagined you'd feel so neglected that you'd turn to someone else." She bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears. "I see now that I was wrong," she admitted. I let my loneliness and frustration cloud my judgment. I made assumptions about how you felt without ever really talking to you about it. I was so wrapped up in my own pain that I didn't see yours. I nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. We both made mistakes, Linda. But some mistakes are harder to forgive than others. I can't look past what you've done, and I can't pretend that things can go back to the way they were. Her shoulders slumped, the realization of her misconceptions weighing heavily on her. I just wanted to feel loved, Tom, she said, her voice barely audible. I wanted to feel like I mattered to you. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. You did matter to me, Linda. You still do, in a way. But love and trust go hand in hand, and once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to mend. We need to move on, for our own sake. She nodded slowly, wiping away a tear. I understand, she said, her voice resigned. I see now that I was wrong about so many things. I just wish I had realized it sooner. The room fell silent, the weight of her revelations hanging in the air. Linda's misconceptions had led her down a path of destruction, and now we were both paying the price. There was no turning back, no fixing what had been irreparably damaged. All that was left was the painful process of moving forward, each of us on our separate journeys toward healing and redemption. As Linda stood there, her expression a mixture of regret and pleading, I felt the need to address something that had been on my mind throughout this ordeal. It wasn't just about the betrayal or the broken vows. It was also about the facade we had maintained in our social circles, the illusion of a perfect life that had now crumbled. Linda, I began, my voice steady but laced with a note of frustration. We've always been concerned about appearances. We kept up this image of a happy couple, successful and in love. We played the part so well that it was almost like we were living in a fantasy. Linda looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. I know, she said quietly. We wanted people to think we had it all together. But now, I continued, the truth is out. The reality of our situation is clear, and it's far from the picture-perfect life we projected. You might have thought that maintaining appearances was important, but look where that got us. It kept us from dealing with our real problems. She met my gaze, her eyes filled with an understanding sadness. I never meant for it to get this bad, she admitted. I thought if we just kept up appearances, maybe we could fix things on our own, without anyone knowing about our struggles. That's the problem, I said, trying to keep my voice calm despite the frustration simmering beneath the surface. We were more concerned with what others thought than with addressing our own issues. We hid behind a mask of normalcy, and in doing so, we neglected the real problems in our marriage. Linda nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the weight of the truth. I see that now, she said softly. I was so caught up in maintaining the image of a perfect life that I lost sight of what really mattered. And now, I pressed on, we're facing the consequences. The truth is out there, and it's not pretty. We can no longer pretend that everything is fine, or that we can fix this by maintaining appearances. The damage is done, and it's time we face it honestly. The silence that followed was heavy with the realization of how deeply we had failed to address our true issues. The facade we had maintained had only served to deepen the chasm between us, obscuring the real problems that needed attention. Now, as we stood on the brink of divorce, there was no longer any room for pretense. The truth was out, and it was clear that maintaining appearances had only compounded our pain. Tom, Linda said finally, her voice breaking the silence. I understand what you're saying. I wish we had faced the truth sooner, that we had been honest with each other about our struggles. I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. We both have regrets, Linda, but we need to move forward not just for ourselves, but for the sake of our own healing. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it and face the future with honesty. The reality of our situation was stark and unyielding, The masks we had worn for so long had fallen away, revealing the raw and painful truth of our marriage. As we confronted this new chapter, there was no room left for illusions. The only way forward was with open eyes and a commitment to facing the truth, no matter how difficult it might be. Linda's eyes were pleading as she took a step closer, her voice tinged with desperation. "Tom, please, just hear me out. We can work through this. Maybe we can find a way to compromise, to salvage what we have left." I looked at her, feeling a mix of sorrow and firmness. The notion of compromise was tempting, a way to avoid the finality of our situation, but I knew it wasn't a solution. "Linda," I said, my voice steady, "I've thought about this a lot. Compromise isn't going to fix what's been broken. The foundation of our marriage has been shattered, and pretending otherwise won't change that." She frowned, her frustration evident. "But we have so much history together. Doesn't that mean anything? Can't we at least try to work things out?" "It's not just about history," I replied, my tone resolute. "It's about the core values that define our relationship: honesty and fidelity. Without those, there's nothing left to salvage. Compromise isn't a solution when the very principles that held us together have been violated." Linda's shoulders slumped, and she looked away, trying to find the right words. "I understand that I've made mistakes, Tom, but doesn't our shared past and the love we once had count for something?" "It does count," I said, though my voice was tinged with sadness. "But love and shared history alone aren't enough. The betrayal you've committed has changed everything. I can't overlook that and settle for a relationship where the trust is gone. Compromise would mean living in a lie, accepting something less than what our marriage should be." She shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. "I thought if we just worked together, if we both put in the effort, we could find a way through this. I never imagined you'd be so firm on this." "My stance isn't about being rigid," I explained, trying to convey my heartfelt conviction. "It's about respecting the principles that define a healthy relationship. If we settle for anything less than complete honesty and fidelity, we're just postponing the inevitable. We'll end up hurting each other more in the long run." Linda took a deep breath, her expression a mix of resignation and sadness. "I see your point," she said quietly. "I guess I just hoped for a different outcome." "So did I admitted, feeling a pang of regret. "But we have to face the truth. Trying to force a compromise now would only be a temporary fix. We need to acknowledge that our marriage, as it stands, can't be repaired. It's time to move on and accept that we can't rebuild what's been destroyed." The reality of our situation settled between us, a heavy, unyielding truth that left no room for compromise. The values that once held our marriage together had been irrevocably damaged, and the only way forward was with honesty and a clear recognition of what had been lost. It was a painful realization, but it was also the necessary step towards finding closure and moving on with our lives. I took a deep breath, the weight of our shared history pressing heavily on my chest. As Linda stood there, her eyes brimming with tears, I felt a deep need to remind her of the promises we once made to each other, promises that had been so easily forgotten in the face of betrayal. "Linda," I began, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "do you remember our wedding day, the vows we exchanged? We stood before our friends and family, pledging our love and commitment to each other. We promised to forsake all others, to stand by each other through every trial." Linda's gaze fell to the floor, her shoulders trembling slightly. "I remember," she said softly. "We made those vows with the full intention of honoring them." I continued, the gravity of our promises weighing heavily on me. "We promised to be honest, to cherish and respect each other. It wasn't just about saying the words. It was about living by them, day in and day out." I took a step closer, my eyes locked onto hers. "When you decided to be unfaithful, you broke those vows. You forsook the very foundation of our marriage. It wasn't just a lapse in judgment. It was a fundamental betrayal of the trust we built over years. We agreed to uphold those vows, no matter how difficult things became." Linda's eyes filled with tears, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I broke my promises, Tom. I didn't mean to hurt you like this. But you did, I said gently but firmly. The damage is done, and it can't be undone by merely feeling regret. Our vows were meant to be the bedrock of our relationship, guiding us through every challenge and keeping us true to each other. When you broke that trust, you dismantled the very essence of what we promised to uphold. Her tears streamed down her face, her expression one of deep regret. I wish I had honored those vows, she said, her voice trembling. I wish I had been true to you. So do I replied, my voice filled with sadness. But wishing doesn't change what has happened. The vows we took were sacred, and breaking them has consequences. It's not just about our past. It's about recognizing that the promises we made have been irrevocably broken. Linda nodded, her shoulders sagging as she absorbed the weight of my words. I understand now, she said quietly. I see how important those vows were, and how I failed to honor them. The vows were more than just words, I said softly. They were a commitment to each other, a promise to be faithful and true. When that promise is broken, the relationship can't be repaired by simply trying to mend the pieces. We have to face the truth and move forward, even if it's painful. The room was filled with the heavy silence of recognition and finality. The vows that once symbolized our deep commitment to each other now served as a stark reminder of what had been lost. As we stood there, the reality of our situation settled in. The promises made on our wedding day were a guiding light that had been extinguished by betrayal, leaving us with no choice but to confront the consequences and seek closure. Linda took a shaky breath, her eyes still glistening with tears as she looked up at me. The weight of the moment seemed to press heavily on her, and she finally spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. Tom, she began, her words coming out in a choked sob. I need to tell you the truth. I've been seeing someone else. The confession hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my heart constrict in my chest. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. I forced myself to stay calm, even as my mind reeled. I already knew, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. But I need to hear it from you. I need to know why. Linda's eyes filled with fresh tears, and she took a deep breath before continuing. I started seeing him a few months ago. At first, it was just someone to talk to, someone who made me feel valued and heard, but it quickly turned into more. I didn't intend for it to get this far, but I felt so isolated and neglected. I clenched my fists, struggling to contain the anger and hurt. Isolated and neglected? I was working hard to provide for us, to build a future. I thought we were in this together, but instead you chose to betray me. I know it's not an excuse, Linda said, her voice trembling. But it's the truth. I felt like you were always gone, always too busy with work to pay attention to me. I was desperate for some emotional connection, and I found it in him. It was wrong, but it was also a way for me to cope with the loneliness I felt. So you decided that being unfaithful was the answer? I asked, my voice strained. Instead of addressing our issues or coming to me with your feelings, you chose to cheat. How is that justified? Linda's face was flushed with the intensity of her emotions. I don't know if it's right to say it's justified, she admitted, but it was a way to fill a void. I thought I could keep everything under control and not let it affect us, but I was wrong. I realize now how selfish and misguided it was. Selfish is an understatement, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay composed. You didn't just make a mistake. You broke the trust we built together. You didn't think about the consequences or how deeply you'd hurt me. You only thought about your own needs. Linda's shoulders shook with silent sobs. I'm so sorry, Tom. I never meant for things to end like this. I see now how much I've damaged everything between us. I wish I could take it all back. The pain in her voice was palpable, but it didn't change the reality of what had happened. Wishing won't undo the hurt, Linda, I said softly, my voice cracking slightly. The damage is done. I need to move forward and find a way to heal, even if it means letting go of what we had. Linda nodded, her expression one of deep remorse and resignation. I understand. I know there's nothing I can do to fix this. I just wanted to be honest with you, even if it's too late. As her confession hung heavy in the air, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. The confrontation had laid bare the raw and painful truth of her actions, and now, as we faced the inevitable end of our marriage, there was nothing left but to confront the consequences and find a way to move on from the shattered remains of what we once shared. I stood there, my emotions a storm of anger and sadness, as Linda's confession lingered between us. The air was thick with the weight of our shattered vows. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice as I spoke. Linda, let's revisit those vows we took, I began, my tone steady but firm. Do you remember the promises we made to each other on our wedding day? We vowed to love and cherish each other, to forsake all others, and to stand by one another through every challenge. Those weren't just words. They were a commitment to be faithful, to honor the trust we built together. Linda's eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the floor. Yes, I remember, she said softly. I took those vows seriously, I continued, my voice growing more intense. When we said forsaking all others, it meant exactly that. It meant that no matter how tough things got, we were to remain loyal to each other. You violated that sacred promise, and now you're trying to justify it as if it were something that could be excused. Her face flushed with the intensity of my words. I never meant to justify what I did, Tom. I just wanted to explain why I acted the way I did. But the explanation doesn't change the betrayal, I said, my frustration evident. Your actions directly contradicted our vows. We promised to be faithful and honest with each other, and you broke that promise. It's not just about the affair itself, it's about the fact that you completely disregarded the very foundation of our relationship. Linda's voice shook as she spoke. I know I failed in honoring those vows. I was wrong, and I regret every decision that led to this point. Regret isn't enough, I countered. It doesn't undo the damage you've caused. We made a commitment to each other, and when you chose to be unfaithful, you undermined everything we built. Our marriage was based on trust, and once that trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair. Her eyes met mine, a mixture of guilt and pain reflected in them. I understand that now, she said quietly. I see how my actions have destroyed the trust between us. I never intended for it to come to this. I'm glad you understand, I replied, trying to keep my tone measured despite the intensity of the situation. But understanding doesn't change the fact that the damage is done. Our vows were meant to be a guiding principle, and when you broke them, you essentially ended the relationship we had. The tension between us was palpable, the air heavy with unspoken pain and regret. Linda's attempts to justify her actions only highlighted the chasm that had grown between us. The vows we had taken were now a stark reminder of what had been lost, and as we faced the reality of our situation, there was no escaping the fact that the promises made on that day could not be undone. As Linda's tears continued to fall, and her attempts to explain her actions grew more desperate, I felt a deep, unwavering resolve settle within me. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh, and despite her pleas and explanations, I knew I had to stand firm. Linda, I said, my voice firm and unwavering. I've heard your explanations, and I understand the circumstances that led to your actions. But none of that changes the fact that you broke the core promises we made to each other. You've tried to justify your infidelity, but there is no justification that can make this right. Linda looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Tom, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I'm sorry for the hurt I've caused you, but don't you think we can find a way to move past this? I shook my head, my expression resolute. Moving past this isn't about overlooking what happened or accepting excuses. It's about acknowledging that the trust we had is gone. Compromise or reconciliation isn't possible when the very foundation of our marriage has been destroyed. She reached out, trying to bridge the gap between us. Please, Tom. I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Can't we at least try to work through this together? No, I said firmly, stepping back. I can't accept any compromise on this. The betrayal was too profound, and the integrity of our vows was shattered. I can't pretend that everything is okay or that your actions can be excused. Our marriage was built on trust and fidelity, and once that's gone, there's nothing left to hold on to. Linda's face crumpled in sorrow, and she took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. I never wanted to hurt you this way. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I thought maybe we could at least try to rebuild. There's no rebuilding what's been lost, I replied, my tone unyielding. The damage is beyond repair. I need to be true to myself and the values we once shared. Compromise won't bring back what we had or fix the damage. We need to face the truth and accept that this is the end. She looked at me, her shoulders sagging with the weight of my words. So, this is really it? There's no chance to fix this? I nodded, my heart heavy with the finality of the situation. Yes, Linda. This is the end. I have to stand firm on this decision because accepting anything less would mean compromising my own principles. I need to move on and find a path forward that respects the commitment I made to myself and to our marriage. The resolution in my voice left no room for further discussion. As the gravity of my stance sank in, the reality of our situation became undeniable. Standing firm was painful, but it was necessary to uphold the integrity of the vows we once held sacred. The end of our marriage was not just a personal loss, but a testament to the importance of trust and fidelity that could not be compromised. The room was filled with an oppressive silence as I stood firm, my heart heavy with the gravity of what I was about to say. Linda's tear-streaked face looked up at me, and I knew it was time to lay out the consequences of her actions. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Linda, I began, my voice steady but laden with emotion. I need you to understand the full scope of what has happened. Your infidelity has not only broken the trust between us, but has also led to significant consequences that affect both our personal lives and our future. Linda's eyes widened, her anticipation mingled with apprehension. What do you mean? She asked quietly, her voice trembling. Firstly, I said, the emotional toll on me has been immense. The betrayal has shattered our marriage, and it's clear that continuing to live in a fractured relationship isn't viable. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about the need for closure and moving forward. She nodded, though her expression was one of confusion and concern. I understand that it's been painful, but what are the specific consequences you're talking about? The consequences are multifaceted, I explained, trying to keep my tone as neutral as possible. For one, I've decided to pursue a divorce. I've already started the process, and I will be seeking a fair division of our assets, considering the breach of trust and the emotional damage caused. We'll need to navigate through the legalities of separating our lives, which will include asset division and spousal support. Linda's face went pale, and she clutched at her chest. Spousal support? Are you serious? Yes, I confirmed, my tone unwavering. Given the circumstances, it's only fair to address the financial implications as well. We both need to move forward, and this process will help us to do so. Additionally, there will be other legal considerations to address, including any impact on our shared responsibilities and commitments. Linda's voice was almost a whisper as she struggled to absorb the implications. What choice are you giving me, Tom? I'm presenting you with the choice to accept the terms of this divorce or to contest them, which will only prolong the process and increase the emotional and financial strain on both of us, I said firmly. Accepting the terms will allow us to finalize the separation and move on with our lives, with as much dignity and respect as possible, given the circumstances. She looked down, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. I didn't realize it would come to this. I thought maybe we could work something out. I wish things were different, I said softly, though my resolve remained firm. But the reality is that the breach of trust has led us to this point. It's important that we face the consequences of our actions and make decisions that reflect the seriousness of what has happened. Linda's shoulders sagged as she took in the full weight of my words. So, if I accept the terms, what happens next? If you accept, I replied, we'll proceed with the legal process and work towards an amicable resolution. We'll both have the opportunity to move on and rebuild our lives separately. It won't be easy, but it will be a step towards closure and moving forward. Linda nodded slowly, her expression one of resigned acceptance. Okay, Tom, I'll accept the terms. I understand that this is the only way forward. I nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Thank you, Linda. It's the best choice for both of us. We need to respect the gravity of the situation and face the consequences head on. As we faced the reality of our situation, the process of separation began, marking the end of our marriage. It was a painful but necessary step towards finding closure and the possibility of healing and moving forward with our lives. With Linda's acceptance of the divorce terms, I set the wheels in motion to finalize the separation. The weight of the decision settled heavily on my shoulders as I prepared to take the necessary legal steps. The following days were filled with meetings with my attorney and the preparation of legal documents that would officially dissolve our marriage. I gathered all relevant financial records, assets, and property details, meticulously documenting everything to ensure a fair division. The legal team worked diligently to draft the divorce petition, outlining the terms we had agreed upon. The process was meticulous and required a thorough review of our shared assets, liabilities, and any other pertinent details. On the day I filed the divorce papers, I felt a profound sense of finality. The documents were submitted to the court, marking the official beginning of the legal separation. The paperwork detailed the terms of asset division, spousal support, and any other arrangements we had discussed. I had done my best to ensure that the process was as fair and equitable as possible, given the circumstances. Linda was informed of the legal proceedings and received copies of the divorce papers. The reality of the situation hit hard as she read through the terms, understanding that there was no turning back. The divorce was now an official matter of record, and the legal process would proceed regardless of any remaining personal feelings or hopes for reconciliation. As the weeks progressed, the divorce proceedings continued with the necessary court appearances and legal formalities. The hearings were somber and formal, reflecting the gravity of the situation. Despite the emotional turmoil and lingering sadness, the process moved forward with a focus on resolving all outstanding issues and concluding the matter as efficiently as possible. Finally, the day came when the court issued the final decree of divorce. The marriage between Linda and me was officially dissolved. The separation was now legally complete, and we were both free to move on with our lives. The finality of the decree was a bittersweet end to a chapter filled with love, betrayal, and heartache. Linda and I had hoped for some semblance of reconciliation, but the reality of our situation left no room for such possibilities. The choices we made and the actions taken led to this definitive end. As the gavel came down and the divorce was finalized, it was clear that we were now on separate paths, each facing the future alone. The end of our marriage marked a significant turning point in both our lives. For me, it was a step towards finding closure and beginning the process of healing. For Linda, it was a moment of reckoning and the acknowledgement of the consequences of her actions. The finality of the divorce was a sobering reminder of the impact of our choices and the need to move forward, despite the pain and loss that came with it. As the final decree of divorce was issued, I felt a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The legal end of our marriage marked a new chapter in my life, but the emotional weight of the journey was far from over. The process had been long and challenging, filled with difficult decisions and painful reflections. Now, the focus shifted from legalities to the personal and emotional aftermath of the separation. In the weeks following the divorce, I faced the task of rebuilding my life. The first step was moving out of the home Linda and I had shared. The process of packing up my belongings and saying goodbye to the place that had once been a symbol of our shared life was both physically and emotionally taxing. Each item packed away carried memories of our time together, making the act of leaving feel like an exercise in letting go. Finding a new place to live was both a practical and emotional challenge. I needed a space where I could start fresh, free from the reminders of my past relationship. I chose a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a place that offered solitude and the opportunity for a new beginning. The process of settling in was cathartic, providing a sense of autonomy and a blank slate to build upon. Throughout this period, I also focused on my personal well-being. I sought support from friends and family, finding solace in their understanding and encouragement. I engaged in activities that brought me joy and provided a sense of purpose. Exercise, hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends became vital parts of my routine, helping me to rebuild my sense of self and regain my equilibrium. The divorce had a significant impact on my social circles as well. Friends and acquaintances were aware of the situation, and navigating these relationships required a careful balance of openness and discretion. I chose to be honest about what had happened, but also made an effort to move beyond the drama of the past. It was important to me to focus on the future and not dwell on the difficulties of the previous months.